Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie recounted his 2-year marriage to his wife, which crumbled after she returned to school for additional qualifications. He discovered flirtatious messages between her and her professor. He exposed her affair during her school presentation, leading to her and the professor's dismissal. Her reputation and career were ruined, and he ultimately kicked her out, taking control of their townhouse. Now let's get into the story. I, 29 male, and my wife, 27 female, have been married for about 2 years. We met on a typical date, one that involved drinks and good conversation. I learned she was a dentist and had recently graduated. She pushed her way through dental school, and she's been successful thus far. I was a contractor for a business and didn't make anywhere near as much money as I heard her making. Still, I wanted to support her, and her love of classical music also brought us together. I took her to see the orchestra, and because of this, the two of us fell in love. After a few months, we moved in together. We both lived in an apartment and eventually, over the next year, realized we felt strongly for one another. With our combined income, we ended up getting a townhouse. I started getting better gigs and working on my business as well, and I fronted most of the mortgage despite her having a successful dental practice. Eventually, a year later, after we moved into the townhouse, popped the question. I asked if she would marry me at a classical music concert on the anniversary of our dating. She said yes, and in a few weeks, we rushed the ceremony and were married. Things were great. I provided for her, getting her luxury items when I could. She gave back as well, despite insisting that I didn't need to. But I loved her, and I wanted to give her the world. Then, things changed. My wife was told that her education was too archaic to qualify for her position. She needed to get continuing education or come back and get a higher education. When she told me this, I was a little hesitant. That's one income that we'll have to rely on. She insisted that the practice would be okay. She wanted to run it still, but would have a more hands-off approach rather than hands-on. After some back and forth, where I told her that she could just do it part-time or something, we came to an agreement. She would go back to school, and I would provide for both of us. It wasn't a huge issue. However, it did mean that both of us would have to live a bit more modestly. She enrolled in school and went full-time. She told me that she'd be done within the year. And then, once she was done, she wouldn't need another continuing education for another 5 years. She could do it throughout the years on her own time. I agree with this, thinking it would be easy. I mean, it's not like I wasn't making money, right? But then it happened. We had some financial troubles. It began with losing a couple of major contracting jobs. I figured I could bounce back and get it together. Then I discovered an employee was embezzling the company funds. Thousands, in fact. We had to pay for a lawyer to provide litigation for that, and I also had to shell out money just to win the case. It was hell, to say the least. I had to do this all on my own because my wife wasn't helping with it. That's when I started noticing the changes. Instead of being open and inviting, my wife grew distant, almost cold and uninviting. And whenever I asked her how school was going, she would act distant. Something was up. I noticed she spent her nights at school later. She told me it was because she was trying to get help from her professor, but something seemed up. When I asked her what she needed help with, she wouldn't directly respond. She said it had something to do with dental techniques and nothing more. I brushed it off initially. After all, she might just be stressed. However, other aspects of our relationship deteriorated. The most apparent was the intimacy. We had it less and less. She shied away, telling me she was too tired. Even on the weekends, when she was freer, she'd hold herself up in her office to work on homework. Eventually, I grew frustrated. Why was my wife pushing me away and kicking me out? I grew curious. I told my buddy about it, and he told me that she might be cheating. That's preposterous. Cheating? Why would she cheat on me? Then, it occurred to me. Maybe that's why she got distant. My friend said the only way to prove it would be to look at texts and recordings. So I did. One night, while she was in the shower, she left her phone out. I thought that it was bait, but when I opened it, I saw some texts. They were all for someone called Professor B, and there was a heart next to it. She sent this person flirty messages, even saying that she wouldn't come home late and planned to spend time with him. I had to figure out who Professor B was. I scored through the school records, finding Professor Burns, one of the lead professors for the dental division. Suddenly, it all made sense. My wife is distant, and of course, she has her own personal disdain for all forms of intimacy. It upset me, but I knew what I had to do. I quickly formulated a plan. My wife had a presentation for her dental academy project. I went to her computer and changed it out. A smile formed on my face when I did it. My wife mentioned her presentation. I asked if anyone could come see it. She said yes, and then I told her I'd come see it. She grew nervous, saying I didn't have to. However, I insist. So on the day of the presentation, I walked in, sitting right in the front row. I watched as it was her turn. My wife popped in the PowerPoint, and the smile she had turned into a look of horror. It was all the messages of her cheating, revealing to everyone here that she was seeing Professor Burns. I even found a couple of videos on her phone too, which I showcased. When my wife asked what this was, I asked her back. I told her that I knew she was cheating and that I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I called her a cheating whore and that I didn't want anything to do with her. She finally broke down, saying that Professor Burns was a good man and that he made her happy. I told her that was no excuse and that I was disgusted with her. Professor Burns was outed, and the faculty immediately fired him. They told him never to come back or teach at the university. I don't know if he ever found another job or if his past haunted him. As for my wife, her being used as a cheater was embarrassing, but the dean took it upon himself to kick both of them out. My wife was blacklisted from other universities too, as it was found she plagiarized a couple of papers. She lost her job and wasn't able to go back to dental school. I kicked her out of the house too. While I fronted the mortgage and it was hard, I don't regret it. She's a cheater and I don't take it kindly. Today's second story. In this story, Opie met his wife at a concert and they quickly fell in love. However, her behavior became suspicious as she stayed late at work. Discovering discrepancies in her paycheck and hiring a private investigator, he found evidence of her affair with a local HOA president. At a fundraiser, he publicly exposed them, leading to their divorce. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I met 5 years ago at a concert in our area. I walked up to her and struck up a conversation about the band, and we had a very interesting chat about it. I gave her my number, and she called me a few days later. We got married 2 years into our relationship, and I thought I met the love of my life. She was smart, funny, good-looking, and kind. She was the kind of woman that I imagined being a phenomenal mother, and I couldn't wait to start a life with her. Early on in our relationship, she was vocal about how scared she was of commitment. She told me that she cared about me and wanted to try and have something serious, but she was worried that something would happen and she would end up getting hurt. I know that a lot of what she was worried about stemmed from her parents. They were staunchly against getting a divorce, but if I've ever met a couple that needed one, it would have been them. From a young age, my wife saw them arguing and calling each other names. Her father cheated on her mother regularly, with many different women, and her mother had a long-standing affair with a man from their neighborhood. It was a loveless marriage, and my wife was afraid she would end up the same way. On the other hand, I grew up with parents that cared deeply about each other, and I was thankful for that after my wife told me about her upbringing. I think her seeing my parents opened her eyes to what I would be like as a partner. There were times early on in our relationship when I could tell that my wife wanted to back out of everything. Her instinct was to run away whenever she started to have feelings for someone, but I had to step in and stop her from doing that several times. After we were married, we settled into our lives, and she started to feel comfortable and secure with me. She was the only woman for me, and my head didn't turn for other women. For a while in our relationship, she would stay late at work. I assumed she was working on a big project or had a lot on her plate. She was always a very focused and ambitious person, so it made sense. I never suspected she would be cheating on me. I only realized something might have been going on when I saw AI, the jerk video on YouTube, where somebody described how they found out their partner was cheating. I went into the video thinking it was just going to be some over-the-top dramatic story, and by the time I was finished with it realized I might have been dealing with something similar. My wife came home from work late again that same night, and I asked her about what it was she did at work so late. Admittedly, I never really asked her much about it before. She never seemed to want to talk about it either. I understood not wanting to talk about work while you're at home, so I didn't pressure her. She seemed surprised by my sudden interest and ended up spinning the conversation about how I never asked about her. She told me it was like she was living with a stranger sometimes because we didn't talk frequently. I knew that was bullshit, and I could tell that she was deflecting and trying to evade my question. She wasn't prepared for me to ask her about what she was doing, so she had to distract me. If she was simply working, she would have just told me the details of what she was doing. She needed to come up with a good lie. I went to bed that night very suspicious about my wife. Of course, I had no solid evidence to confront her about anything. I thought through what I would be able to do in order to find out the truth. I didn't like the idea of snooping through her phone, but I also knew that it would likely give me a lot of information. The only problem with that was that she always had her phone on her person. If there was a moment where it wasn't with her, she would be quick to realize that and catch me snooping. I thought about it a bit more and had an idea. She was paid hourly at her job, so if she was staying late so many nights a week, certainly her paycheck would reflect some overtime. We had a joint bank account where both of our paychecks were deposited, so I looked at all of her previous deposits and compared them to a recent week where she worked at least 10 hours of overtime according to her. There was virtually no difference in the paychecks. The payments that were deposited were reflective of 40 hours a week with taxes, benefits, and Social Security taken out. At that point, I knew that she was lying to me. I had already suspected it, but I had proof of it. I just needed to get proof that she was lying because of an affair. I weighed the options and eventually decided that the best way forward would be to hire a private investigator. One of my close friends had actually hired one in the past, so they were able to connect me with him. I paid him and caught him up on everything that I thought was going on. He then began following my wife to try and catch her in an affair or figure out what was really going on after work. By that point, just the idea of my wife cheating had already put a bitter taste in my mouth. We hadn't been talking much and I could see that she was eager to get away from me. Because of that, she was spending more time at work. The private investigator had been working for about 3 days when they contacted me for the first time with information. They found a receipt for a restaurant near my wife's place of business in the trash can. It had her signature on it, so they were confident that she was there. On top of that, it looked like she had ordered for 2 people. Through some means that I'm not entirely sure are ethical or legal, the PI was able to look at the security footage from the restaurant. As clear as day, there was footage of my wife sitting across a dinner table from a man and holding his hand. I couldn't make out who it was in the video, unfortunately. Holding his hand wasn't exactly cheating, but with everything else going on, I think it was safe to assume that there was something between them. After getting the footage, the PI did a stakeout on my wife's work and followed her to the house of the man she was with. There he was able to get the name of the man we suspected she was having an affair with. It wouldn't have been legal for him to take any pictures or videos since they were within his house, but he told me he witnessed them together. That was all I needed. I didn't feel like I needed to see the evidence myself if I had a professional confirming my suspicions. I would be divorcing my wife if she was cheating. The PI gave me the other guy's name, and I immediately recognized it. He was the head of the local homeowners association. I wasn't very involved with it, but my wife was. She attended meetings and helped plan some events for the organization. There she met a lot of other people in town and made a lot of friendships too. She was always excited to go to the meetings, and I never thought twice about it. The man was married Mormon and had 5 children. I was certain an affair wouldn't look good for him. I compiled all of the information the PI gave me and I contacted a divorce attorney about moving forward. I didn't think I was going to do anything to get back at them, but as I was getting some water from the fridge, I saw a homeowners association events calendar sitting there. It had all the meeting dates, event dates, and fundraiser dates written in. There was a fundraiser a few days away. I kept quiet about what I knew and worked with my attorney on the divorce in private while I waited for the event. The day finally came, and my wife was shocked to see that I wanted to go with her. It was a silent auction to raise the funds to build a gazebo in a park near the neighborhood. I sat at a table with my wife while dinner was served to everyone. Before the auction began, the homeowners association president, who was the man my wife was sleeping with, stood up to toast all of the donors and volunteers. He personally thanked my wife for her tireless effort in planning the event. He made a joke about how she would call him all the time with questions and ideas for it. I interrupted and asked, "Is that all she called you for?" He was quiet and looked between my wife and me, very confused. I stood up and clarified my question, accusing both of them of sleeping together. Everyone in the room was scandalized by what I was saying. I told them that I knew the truth, that they were caught in his home sleeping together. They both fervently denied it, but I was firm in why I said it. His wife stood up and yanked him away to question him, and I left the room while everyone from the neighborhood began gossiping about them. I heard some of them talking about how they thought they were always too friendly for married people. My wife followed me home and tried to lie some more about it, telling me I was out of line for accusing her. I explained how I knew about it, and she eventually gave in. All I asked her was why she did it. She had the audacity to blame her parents. She said that she had never seen a normal marriage and infidelity was in her blood. She started rambling about some cheating gene that scientists had recently discovered. It seemed like a load of shit to me. It was a poor excuse. I told her I was already filing for divorce, and there wasn't a thing she could do to stop it. Now we are officially over. She's moved out of the house, and I am thinking of selling and moving into a smaller place in the city. The man she cheated with also divorced and no longer lives in the neighborhood.